But we start with the biggest story in all of sports, not just college basketball. It is the big story. Caitlin Clark becoming the NCAA's all-time leading scorer in women's college hoops with that logo 3 during a dominant win over Michigan. Clark would go on to score an Iowa program record 49 points in the win, not just passing Kelsey Plum, but Antoine Davis, Pete Maravich clearly in the sights as Clark looks to become the all-time leading scorer, man or woman, in all of college basketball. You look at the big stat fueled by Gatorade. Here are the numbers. Clark now at 35-69. She's just 75 away from tying Antoine Davis. And you see Pistol Pete there. He is less than 100 away, of course, for regular season games and then the tournament. It almost seems at this point that is an eventuality. Clark will become the best scorer in college basketball history. After she did it on Thursday night, she took a moment to talk about the accomplishment and what it all meant with Kylan Mills.
Caitlin, you couldn't script it any better. A logo 3 to break the record, a career-high 49 points, and you are now the NCAA women's basketball all-time scoring leader. What does it mean to you to see your name atop that list of greats?
I mean, I'm just really thankful to be able to do it in our home arena with these fans that have supported me since I stepped on campus, and to have my teammates celebrate me like that. I think it just speaks to the culture Coach Bluter's built here, and, you know, I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for those girls, whether it's, you know, past teammates, present teammates, our coaches who have allowed me to be Caitlin, and I'm just really thankful more than anything. I mean, it's just an unreal feeling, and probably something that, you know, you're going to remember for the rest of your life and cherish for the rest of your life. So I'm just, you know, really lucky.
You also said how influential it was growing up to watch WNBA players to run on the court as a little girl. What is your message now to all the little boys and girls who are watching you with similar big dreams?
I think just dream. Don't ever let anybody tell you no. You know, I'm still 22 years old, and I still dream that exact same way. There's still so much that I want to accomplish, and I know you're still young, and you want to do all these things. Don't let anybody tell you you can, because that's exactly what I live by today still too, and it's done wonders for me. And you got to work really hard. Things aren't always going to go your way, but just keep working, and you know, you can do whatever you put your mind to.
It is time for the big interview, and we welcome in Megan McEwen. Megan, first of all, I am remarkably envious and jealous of where you were last night and the experience you got to have in watching Caitlin Clark break this record. So take me there, take all of our viewers there. What was that moment like when she knocked down that logo 3?
Is there only one way for Caitlin Clark to break the record? Of course, it's on a logo 3. In fact, talking to her at shoot around, I asked her, how do you want to break it if you had a chance to really pick how this goes down? And she says, I mean, a logo 3 obviously would be great, but we have to see how the game goes. And obviously, goal number 1 is to win the game, which Iowa came out firing. Caitlin Clark, particularly, scoring the team's first 8 points. And for her to hit it on a logo shot, when I say the roof came off of Carver Hawkeye Arena, it was incredible to be there. And personally, as someone who's grown up around women's basketball their whole life, this was the most special moment that I've been able to witness. It was emotional. Lisa Bluter called a timeout as soon as there was a dead ball, and the crowd just continued to roar as Caitlin Clark was celebrated for this incredible accomplishment, tackled by her teammates. It was one of the coolest moments to witness. And, you know, as a network, we've been covering Caitlin Clark since she was a freshman. So to see her rise to stardom the way she has on this stage is truly incredible.
And to me, Megan, it's not just the fact that she did it, it's the way that she did it. Yes, it was the logo 3, but it was dominance from the start. And I got the sense, and you can speak to this, from the crowd, that they were just happy it happened so quickly because no one really wanted to wait. Last couple of games, we were wondering how close would she be? Would it happen? There was no doubt because it happened so quickly.
We were thankful it happened so quickly. 2 minutes, 12 seconds. Are you kidding me? Like, this is what Caitlin Clark is capable of doing. It's unbelievable, the consistency we've seen ever since she stepped foot on Iowa's campus her freshman year. Going into it also, you know, you want to focus on the game, but there's this huge story. Everybody knows it. And Kim Barnes-Arico for Michigan was fabulous in shoot around, speaking to the impact that Caitlin Clark has had on the game over the course of her career, how she's elevated women's basketball, and also how she's elevated the Big Ten as a whole. Right now, the world is focusing on Caitlin Clark in Iowa, but they also care about Big Ten women's basketball and how things have been able to shake out over the last couple of years. as the Big Ten has truly separated itself as one of the best conferences in women's basketball.
Obviously, with the record, Caitlin is known as a scorer, but those who follow college basketball also know that she is probably the best all-around player that we've ever seen. Double-digit assists again on Thursday night. She's the only player, man or woman, with 3,300 points, more than 1,000 assists, more than 800 rebounds. When you start to think about what she is all around, I think, Megan, the amazing thing is you could say she's the best scorer, one of the best assist players in history, and a really good rebounder, and there's nobody else in the history of this game that can say that.
Caitlin Clark's best attribute of her game is her assist ability and that vision that she possesses, how quickly she plays, how she finds her teammates. It's what's going to carry over and make her so effective at the pro level quickly. She continues just to do everything so consistently. And none of her game is new necessarily. She just continues to fine-tune all the pieces that she brought to college. And that's what's been so impressive, is how dominant she's been with the tool set that she came in with. Caitlin Clark is going to go down as the best, one of the best college basketball players, maybe the best ever, when it comes to how many triple doubles she has, her ability to lead the nation in scoring and assist, her rebounding ability at 6 feet tall. She can play so fast because she's getting the rebound and passing it up the floor. It's like magic. So for her to be in this position is truly remarkable. And she has changed college basketball. The way Steph Curry changed the NBA by knocking down 35-footers, Caitlin Clark is doing the same exact thing in women's basketball, and the whole entire world is taking notice.
And now only two names stand above her, both in men's basketball, Antoine Davis, Pete Maravich, both very reachable. Are those goals, you think, something that Caitlin is thinking about as well, or was this the one record that the focus was mainly on, and then after this, it kind of opens things up for her and the Hawkeyes to worry about what they're really worried about, and that's getting back to the Final Four?
I was focused on trying to win the Big Ten, trying to win the Big Ten tournament, and like you said, getting back to the Final Four. Yes, to beat those two names that you named who were tremendous in college basketball. I mean, look, Pistol Pete did that in 3 years, the all-time scoring record before there was a three-point line. It's absolutely wild. Caitlin Clark will likely break Pistol Pete's record in about a month or so in the NCAA tournament likely, which is incredible to think. She said she wasn't too focused on the record headed into until this game because everybody started talking about it and you couldn't really get away with it, or get away from it rather. But look, Iowa wants to win a championship. That's the goal. Caitlin Clark has been able to do everything she could possibly want in her career. She's just missing that national title ring.
Megan, I think we do have to talk about one other team inside the Big Ten. I understand that Iowa and Caitlin are getting all the attention, but Ohio State is quietly, and I don't know how you get to number 2 in the country and do it quietly, but they are quietly ranked as the second best team in the country. They beat Iowa already. They beat Indiana already. They have so many different parts that are wonderful on both ends of the floor. What are we to make of Ohio State and the Buckeyes' national championship chances?
You want to peak headed into February and March when you're a basketball team. Ohio State is doing just that. Cody McMahon is finally hitting her stride in her sophomore year, scoring at a high level. Celeste Taylor, who transferred in from Duke, the ACC Defensive Player of the Year, is finally getting comfortable in Kevin McGuff's system. What was impressive to me about Ohio State is they played on the road at Michigan State last week, and they were dominant from beginning to end. 3 of their top scorers got into foul trouble in the first half. It didn't matter. The bench came in, scored at a high level, defended at a high level, turned Michigan State over. It was so impressive to see the way this team has come together, and they're playing some of their best basketball right now. Ranked number 2 in the country. They're a real threat to be a really deep NCAA tournament team and to win the Big Ten outright right now.
All right, Megan, before we let you go, one final question. I know you got a plane to catch. You're a busy woman right now from place to place, game to game. What other teams should we be focused on as we get into the last couple of weeks of the regular season? You and I spoke about Penn State a few weeks ago. Now the Lady Lions have hit a little bit of trouble. Michigan State has lost a couple of games against good time competition, but who else should we be watching as we try to figure out just how many spots the Big Ten will fill in the NCAA tournament bracket?
Keep your eye on Nebraska. Yes, they lost to Rutgers about a week ago, but they knock off number 2 Iowa at home. A huge resume-boosting win that they really needed to stand out on the NCAA tournament committee. And then you also have Penn State to continue to look at. I know they've kind of cooled off as of late, but anything can happen over the course of the next 2 weeks. Michigan State is still a team I'm really high on as an NCAA tournament team and as someone who can make some serious noise. When you get to March, they have depth. Nobody's going to want to play against the Spartans. And then Michigan would be that last team to keep an eye on. They already knocked off now number 2 Ohio State. There's going to be a rematch in a couple of weeks. That's going to be interesting. What else can Michigan do in the next 4 to 5 games to continue boosting that NCAA tournament resume?
She may be the hardest working woman in show business. Megan McEwen, we appreciate the time. Safe travels. We'll catch up again sometime soon.
Thanks, Rick. Always good being here.
Well, in case you turned off the TV during halftime of either of Thursday's Big Ten basketball matchups, you missed some pretty good second-half comebacks. Moab Mag, Andre Hyatt, and, of course, Jeremiah Williams. What an addition, fueling Rutgers the comeback win over Northwestern. This team is really good at home. Once 13 down, Scarlet Knights roar back to win their 4th straight. And Purdue was down at the half at home against Minnesota, but Mason Gillis, Braden Smith, of course, the big fella, Zach Edey, with another double-double, 20-something, and in the teens for rebounds. I mean, that's just what Zach does, as each Rutgers and Purdue pick up big-time victories. With all that, welcome you back inside our Big Ten Today studio. Rick Pizzo, now joined by Andy Katz and Mike DeCourcy via the magic of television. Mike, I start with you, and I start with Purdue, Minnesota. We know the Gophers have become a really tough out as of late, but more so at home than on the road. They gave Purdue a big-time scare. What did you see from the Boilermakers in the way they came back, especially the play of Smith, Gillis, and Edey in the second half?
Well, I'm going to be guilty, like so many others, of assuming that Zach is going to be great, because he's great nearly every game. He's as consistent as you can possibly be as a college basketball player. So we move past what he does and did to the excellence of Braden Smith, who really opened things up for Zach with some of his attacks on the goal, and how that really seared open the Badgers, the Gophers defense, and made such a difference in the second half. And what I saw that was most important last night this was not an anomaly. Mason Gillis has played really well lately. This Mason Gillis is the difference between Purdue getting where they want to go and where they don't. If he plays like this on the offensive end, if he's making shots, they win the biggest games, because everything else is in place for them to do that. But having that stretch 4 who can go out and bust threes and also drive the ball if people overclose on him, it makes such a huge difference for the Boilers. And I look at that as the most important ingredient of them getting where they want to go, which is obviously to Glendale and State Farm Stadium.
A couple things on him. I agree totally with what Mike's saying on Mason Gillis. I think he's been one of the more important players and impactful players this season. You know, he's averaging 8 and 3 in 21 minutes, but his numbers are up 47%, in terms of threes, 20 offensive rebounds. He reminds me, and I'm going to draw a little parallel here, of not the same kind of player, but kind of like a Marcus Smart type player, where he's not the 1 option, the 2 option, 3 option, but he does a little bit of everything. He's tough. He'll make some shots every once in a while. He'll rebound. He'll set the tone. He's unselfish. And what Gillis has gone through in his career, he is the kind of guy in this climate that could have left. You know, I want to get mine. I want to be more of a featured player. He stuck it out with Painter, vice versa. They worked together, and he's all in now. And for that reason, I agree with Mike. He's a player that can help elevate them. And if they get in a tight situation, like they did against FDU last year, he doesn't let that happen. He rallies them together, and through toughness and various 50-50 balls, he gets it done.
Before you go back to Mike, I just want to make sure, Marcus Smart NBA version, because he was option 1 when he was in college, but not with the Boston Celtics.
But the ultimate guy that, when he was with the Celtics, that just gets it done for you in some form or fashion.
Mike?
Now, at the other end, I think there was one concern that was obvious last night, was guarding a great stretch 4, in this case, Dawson Garcia. So Mason has to do a better job. They obviously, Trey Kaufman-Wren has to be able to get out there and guard the shooter. So that's, to me, what really matters at the other end, is if they get that kind of opponent. I mean, there aren't a lot of Dawson Garcias out there, but there are other fours who can make shots. I mean, we saw Brady Manick take Carolina all the way to the championship game in 22 doing that. So they have to make sure that they do a more adequate job than they did last night. That was one hole that was in the Boilers' performance.
One quick thing I just want to say about the Gophers. We don't know if they're going to do enough to get in, obviously, but they're going to be in the postseason in some form. And if that's the NIT, that's a team that could win that tournament. That tournament's going to be, by the way, in Hinkle if you get to that Final Four, to build momentum. Ben Johnson is building momentum for that program.
You finally feel it. You
Yes.
finally feel like they're headed in the right direction after years of injuries and inconsistency. This has become a team that is a really tough out now every single time they take the floor. Clearly, you can say the same thing about Rutgers. Andy has the bus driver hat back on again. Listen, Steve Peichel's team is a completely different team, and there's one reason why. It's Jeremiah Williams. He steps in, and Mike, Rutgers has become, especially on the offensive side, just a completely different team than the team that they were a month and a half ago. And you hope if they continue on this run, the committee looks at Rutgers with Jeremiah Williams and says, yes, this is a team that we know can compete in the NCAA tournament.
Well, I will say that that can be overemphasized, Rick.
Interesting.
They didn't have him, and they are what they are without him and with him. That's the record. We look back to 2018. Bonzie Colson was an All-America level player. Jeremiah Williams is terrific. He's playing at what would be a second or third team All-Big Ten level if he had played a full season. He's been outstanding. But Bonzie Colson was a literal first-team All-America candidate when he was injured about 11 games into Notre Dame's season in 2018. He missed, I believe, the next 19 games. Notre Dame, I think, was 8-11, if I remember the numbers correctly. He came back, and they were very good, but not elite. And the committee said, well, that's how it goes. And so Jeremiah Williams, what his goal now, or his job now, is to make sure that what they do over the next several games makes them an NCAA tournament team on the whole. And then when they get in with this group, if they can get in, and it's still a climb, but if they could do that, they become a really dangerous team. And that's when Jeremiah Williams' performance becomes integral to what the committee thinks of Rutgers. They have to look and they say, well, they may have a 12-seed record, but with Jeremiah Williams, they're more of a 7-seed or a 6 or whatever it might be. That's what they have to look at. But I don't think that the fact he missed all that time is going to be given any credit. They just have to get there with the numbers that they build from his arrival to the end of the year.
Well, obviously those numbers got better with the win over an expected tourney team in Northwestern on Thursday night.
And just one other quick point, you cannot dismiss the improvement even more so defensively from Cliff Amore. Continues to block shots, top defensive player in the country. Look, 2 years ago, I was somewhat prophetic. I said, go 4-2 down the stretch, they're going to get in.
Is this when you were driving the bus?
This is the beginning of the bus. I'm back on the bus. We're speeding down the highway within the speed limit. 7 games left. Here's the number for you and for Mike. 5-2. They go 5-2 with this remaining schedule. I believe they will be in the NCAA tournament. That means winning the home games, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio State, definitely possible. And then in the 4 road games, Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska, Wisconsin, can you get 2 of them? They've won 2 straight in Madison. You can beat Minnesota Sunday, maybe. Maybe you're not going to get Purdue, although they'll play them well. We'll see. Purdue was down at the half against the Gophers last night. But you go 5-2 with the slate, I think they get in.
To me, Sunday's game in Minnesota is absolutely critical because I just don't think you're going to win at Purdue. The Boilers right now are playing arguably the best basketball in all of the nation. I think you have to get that game against Minnesota because if you don't, then you either have to win at Purdue or you have to win both those road games in Madison and in Lincoln, which are 2 really tough places to play.
Yes, I agree with you.
Okay.
But 5-2. Figure out a way to get 5-2. You got to win those 3 home games. 2 of those 4 road games, they get in.
How's the bus right now? Oiled up?
Yes.
New tires?
There were some repairs.
Good?
We hit a couple of ditches. And don't forget the road win at Seton Hall. If they're going to be a tournament team, that's still hanging out there.
All right. For a while there, Andy did not have the bus driver cap on. He was renting a car, an electric. Now he's back behind the wheel. The big rig going down the highway. Andy Katz driving the Rutgers bus. Once again, all is right in life. Now that we know Caitlin Clark is the all-time leading scorer in women's college basketball, we can focus on the second most important item in all of college hoops. It is the reveal of Mike DeCourcy's new bracket. You see, the forecast is out. Our bracketologist has been living on nothing but looking at paper and drinking coffee for the last, 3.5 weeks. These are the teams in his latest bracket. Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, and barely Michigan State would be considered favorites in the first round if the tournament started today, and Mike was exactly right, which he always is. Northwestern has fallen to a 9 seed in the latest bracket. Nebraska hanging on just barely as an 11 seed. All right, so Mike DeCourcy now joins us, and the coffee cup is hidden somewhere below actual camera level. Mike, let's start with Purdue. They are clearly a 1 seed. They're clearly, in most people's eyes, the best team in the country. So over the next couple of weeks, what do the Boilers basically have to do?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I know Matt Painter's going to not want to hear this, and he may not be listening live, but then it's going to pop up on one of the re-airs, right? And he's going to see this, and he's not going to want to be have any connection with this at all, because I think if they get through the next week or two against the lesser part of their schedule, and then they close with Michigan State, at Illinois, and Wisconsin, I honestly think that they could go 1-2 in those games and lose the quarterfinal and still be a 1 seed. That's how far ahead they are of the fourth number 1 seed at this point, Arizona, who they beat in a neutral court game here in Indianapolis. So I don't think that Purdue's going to do that. I think Purdue is going to be more successful than that. But that's the bar that they've established at this point. How many laps they are ahead? They could pit, take on some new tires, have a diet soda, and then get back on the track and still be a 1 seed.
No question, it's either Purdue or UConn as the 1 overall, and it doesn't matter because geography this season is favoring Purdue and UConn. UConn's going to be in Brooklyn and Boston, fine. Purdue is going to be in Indianapolis. You get out of that, they'll be in Detroit. It doesn't matter which is the 1 overall. They're going to play where they want to play. They're going to be a 1 seed. It is locked. Bake it.
I love it. One of the slats on our rundowns, this is what we go by. It says Purdue's key, just don't screw it up over the last couple of weeks. I mean, that's about as accurate as it could possibly be, right?
Yeah. I mean, but to Mike's point, who else are you going to put there? Right. And that line was underneath Mike there, 15 quad 1. Done. It's over.
And as Mike said, listen, every game, especially in the Big Ten right now, you can't predict anything, but their schedule does soften a little bit over the last couple of weeks. They'll be big-time favorites in pretty much the rest of the way. All right, Mike, let's focus on Illinois. This, to me, is a fascinating team. Without Terrence Shannon, they played fairly well. Shannon comes back. They have a few issues reintegrating him, and now he's fully back in. And last time out, he was just absolutely dominant and looked like the TSJ that could maybe lead this team to the Final Four. I've said this for a long time in watching this team, Mike. I think once they get outside of the Big Ten, they're a team that is going to mess up a lot of folks that don't see them on a regular basis because they are so big, so long, and have such unique size and skill.
Rick, I totally agree with you. I have them as a 4 right now, okay, and others may have them as a 3. It depends. It's a matter of flavor, and we'll see tomorrow what the committee says. But what I think should be their goal is to try to get into that range. 2 may be a little bit hard to reach, but it's not totally out of reach. Their schedule down the stretch doesn't provide a lot of elite opportunities for them to get attention getting wins. So I think they need to play really well down the stretch and not take too many losses in a league that can do that to you, especially on the road. But if they can get into that 3 level, what the advantage that provides is not having to face a 1 until the regional final. They're certainly not going to have to deal with Purdue again after they get through Big Ten play until they reach the Final Four. Illinois and Purdue will not be in the same region. But they don't want to have to face a UConn, say, in the Sweet 16. They'd much rather, if they get the chance, play them in the Elite 8, or maybe somebody takes care of UConn for them. So I think that's the goal for the Illini right now. Continue to escalate their game, to improve, and then try to see if they can get up to a 3 or a 2. And I think if they do that, they're in a great position going into March.
Yeah, I think that of all these Big Ten teams we're going to talk about, they maybe have the biggest range because they could get as high as a 2 If they really stumbled, could they drop to a 5? All of that is possible over the next month. But I agree with you, Mike, and get them out of the Big Ten, and they're going to be very difficult to face. I also would say, even though they don't have the quad one games coming up as much, they're the kind of team that if they get and win the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis, neutral court, that could potentially help them. Because as we've seen, the rest of the country, there are very few teams that have gone on a significant role to hold these various positions. So there is still movement on lines 2, 3, 4, 5.
That one team that was moving in the wrong direction, righted the ship last time out, but after 4 straight losses, Wisconsin at one point was 8-1 in the Big Ten, Mike, and we were talking about them potentially being a 1 seed. Now they're nowhere near that line. Where does Wisconsin land in your latest reveal?
Well, the latest one is a 5. They were as high as a 4 for me, and they were a 3 at some points, and even a 2. So they have fallen down. I had them as a 6 on Tuesday. I got a lot of heat from Badgers fans for that, but I thought that their performance, not necessarily recently, but what their recent performance had done to their resume took them down to that spot. I suspected they'd be back up to a 5 today, and they are. But what Wisconsin's concern here is they have to go to Iowa, then they have home against Maryland and at Indiana. And the reality is those are the kinds of games they've been losing lately. So they have to flip that. They have to win those games, all 3 of them. For a Badgers team that wants to be in the conversation for a 3 or a 4, they have to win those games. It's not easy, but those are teams that a team that's on that level is going to beat most of the time. Not all the time again, but most of the time they'll get those 3 wins. Later on down the line, they have to play Illinois. That's the kind of game that if they establish what I just described, winning all those games, they could afford to take the loss in the Illinois game and still hold in the 4-3 range.
I also would not dismiss that home Rutgers game. Rutgers has played very well in Madison. They've won 2 in a row the last couple of years. So that's going to be a dicey game for the Badgers. I just have a feeling, and I don't know this, obviously, that they may be that last team on the 4 line in the top 16 reveal. Somewhere in that last team 4, or when they discuss who the next group of 4 were for the 4 line, I think the Badgers are going to be right there. But again, they could stumble, like Mike says. They could be down all the way to a 6. I don't think they can get back to a 2. So it's probably going to be in the 4-5 range for them.
Yeah, that reveal coming on Saturday. We move down to the 8 line, which is where Mike has Michigan State. Now, last time we saw Michigan State against Illinois, they were terrific over this past weekend, right? And then they back it up with another win. Mike, this is a team that when they're really good, when Malik Hall and A.J. Hoggard get going, they're as good as anybody. But they've struggled to be consistent, and I'm guessing that's why they sit right in that middle of your seating.
Yeah, with their metrics, though, if they could get on a roll, and we've been saying this about them for a while, and they kind of have to an extent, but I mean, they have to really continue it. If they take it all the way down through February into March, if they get that kind of that momentum and the kind of record that would go with that momentum, they could get themselves up into the 6 range because of the metrics. They are so beautifully described by Ken Palm. Ken Palm loves them. The net loves them. And those are the metrics that matter most to seeding. Getting in is more about the record metrics, like strength of record and KPI, but those predictive metrics, the power metrics, are the ones that get you seeded. So if they can have a record that says, yeah, we're as good as our metrics, then at that point, the committee has to think about putting them in a more prominent position.
I think they can get as high as the 6. I wouldn't be shocked if they get to a 7. That's where they want to be. They don't want to be in the 8-9. No one wants to be in the 8-9. But again, they are a team. Remember, they were projected as a top 5, top 10 team in the preseason. That if they end up playing, hypothetically, a 1 in round 2, you are playing a team that is seeded to its record, not its talent. And that would be really tough. I'm going to flip around. I think that would be a tough game for the 1 seed in the second round if you get Michigan State in an 8-9 match.
If you get them at their best.
Yes.
Northwestern's an interesting case. They come off the loss to Rutgers. Mike, I know you have them as a 9. A few weeks ago, Cats fans were thrilled. We're going to be a really high seed. We beat Purdue. We beat Illinois. Is there any cause for concern here for that fan base over the next couple of weeks in Northwestern getting to the point where they actually have to win games?
Well, I think they have to win games because they have to prove that they're still a solid tournament team without Ty Berry. Last night didn't hurt them that much because it was a road game against a team that's surging and obviously is terrific at home regardless. But I do think that they need to win as many games as they can under those circumstances. And we look at their predictive metrics. They're a hard team to seed because of that. The predictive metrics do not stand up to a team that's beaten Purdue, Illinois, Dayton, etc. So they need to win games for both of those reasons. If they do, I think they'll be solidly in.
Got to win their home games. Be great if they could get another road win in here somewhere. What was difficult about that game last night was no Ty Berry, but then no Ryan Langborg. They are so thin on that perimeter now. And now if you essentially take two shooters out, which was what happened, comes down to the stretch run, and it's basically, boo, you got to win it for us. And they lost the lead, and it was down to one option, and he can't do it all the time. And so that really, I thought, just magnified their issues when Langborg gets ejected and you already don't have Ty Berry.
All right, let's touch on Nebraska, the last team in Mike's latest reveal. You have the Huskers as an 11 seed. Obviously, that means there is work to be done. What are you looking at when you're seeding Nebraska in that 11 spot?
Is it a good thing or a bad thing that their schedule doesn't include, other than possibly Rutgers, any tournament contenders the rest of the way? And we'll know by the time they play Rutgers, that's the next to last game, whether or not they have another game against a true contender. But otherwise, they don't. So they can't lose many because almost every one of those games would be sort of, I hate to use the term bad loss because we know the strength of this league, but it would not be a positive development for them as they fight to maintain their position in the bracket. So Nebraska has to finish well, and a lot of that will include playing well on the road because that's one area where their resume is weak. If they take care of business down the stretch in the way I described, they'll account for that as well.
And where they may get that tournament team is in their Thursday matchup in the Big Ten tournament, assuming that's where they are. And that game could end up being a significant game for Nebraska. Ultimately, I think they will get in and not play in Dayton. I think they'll either be a 10 or one of those last 11s that doesn't have to play in Dayton.
Always fun. We always get 1-2 teams in that Thursday game where you think to yourself, they have to win this game to get into the tournament.
Happened in Indiana a couple years ago.
A lot of times they then win that Friday game as well and feel really comfortable. I'll say this, Nebraska gets in. I think Fred Hoiberg is your Big Ten Coach of the Year. Don't forget about your weekend Big Ten basketball schedule. Got a couple for you here on Saturday. Penn State on the road to take on Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa. Also Sunday night here on Big Ten Network, you can see Minnesota at home against Rutgers. Our focus, though, the Saturday games, and we start with Mike, and we start with Penn State, Nebraska, Huskers at home. We just talked about their tourney fate, seemingly one of those games, Mike, that Nebraska has to find a way to win.
Absolutely, and the first place to look is with Keisei Tominaga, coming off a stretch of games where he's averaged 20 points. It's been fantastic. He slumped in the 3 games prior to that, and it hurt Nebraska. They need his scoring output, especially with the way Penn State can pressure the basketball. He needs to use the freedom that he can get out of that approach and use it wisely, get into the lane, make those floaters that he does. And I also think it'll be a Jawan Gary game for the Huskers. This seems like the kind of game where his physicality, his toughness, his ability to get in the lane and make plays, I think all of that will play well for Nebraska against the way Penn State likes to defend.
Of course, being in Lincoln always helps as well. Nebraska 15-1 inside Pinnacle Bank Arena so far this season. Wisconsin, Iowa, fascinating to me because the Badgers got back on track. I've been one of those guys for a couple of weeks just waiting for Iowa to kind of figure things out. I thought that comeback win over Minnesota was going to be the panacea for them the rest of the year, and then they lose to Maryland. I just don't know what to expect from this matchup.
Well, Wisconsin has actually played well at Carver Hawkeye over the last couple of years, but they're going to have to score well. And they did finally this past week. They obviously didn't, and Rutgers is a really good defensive team, but they got to get off to a great start. That's been a problem with Wisconsin during that 4-game losing streak. They got knocked back on their heels, and then they're playing catch-up. If Iowa's clicking offensively, you can't do that. You're going to have to stay with them right at the beginning.
Badgers have won 4 straight against the Hawkeyes. Remember, that is a 2:15 Eastern, 1:15 Central tip here on Big Ten Network. Mike, Illinois travels to College Park. That's the good news for Maryland. This team is really solid at home, but they're going to have to find a way to figure out how you defend Terrence Shannon Jr. in that Illini offense.
Terrence Shannon has been just tremendous on the basketball floor the last several games. He's had 3 20-point games in his last 4, and 2 of those over 25. So that's a huge challenge for the Terps. But remember this. The Illini are coming off a game that was really not a challenge for them. This is not going to be like a no-Doug Michigan. This is going to be Jameer Young and the toughness of Dante Scott and Julian Reese at the rim. It's going to be a much greater challenge for the Illini in this game than they faced earlier this week.
No Doug Michigan is an interesting way to describe it. Michigan can't wait. By the way, he's got to sit out one more road game, does Doug McDaniel, before Michigan gets him back for good for the rest of the year and tries
assuming
to make,
they approve it.
Assuming they approve it.
Yeah.
And that would, Michigan's struggling right now.
Yeah.
Any good news is very welcome for Juwan Howard and this team. And speaking of Michigan, they can get some good news because if there's a game in which they're going to bring their best, it's going to be against Michigan State. That comes up on Saturday night. It's in Ann Arbor, so you'll have McDaniel. And still, I think everybody is expecting Michigan State to win this game.
Well, first off, I was there a week ago when they beat Wisconsin. They played really well with McDaniel. Can they duplicate that? Malik Hall for the Spartans has been sensational last 10 games. Different player since when he got shut out against Northwestern, averaging 15. He's got 20 assists, 3 steals, 9 turnovers overall, and shooting the ball really well. The interesting thing here, when I was there last week in Ann Arbor, they were talking about how many Michigan State fans were gobbling up tickets. I do think this is going to probably be maybe the most Michigan State fans we've seen at Chrysler. They were really worried. This is pregame for the Wisconsin game, what kind of crowd they were going to have for the Spartan game. So be interesting to see what happens.
Interesting. Gobbling up tickets. We've seen that phenomenon in the Big Ten as of late with Caitlin Clark. You see some of the tickets, front row, were going for like $1,500. The impact that she has had on college basketball, and we don't just say women's college basketball, but college basketball.
Any college sport right now, she's the one that you want to go see.
And before we say goodbye, once again, congratulations to Caitlin Clark, of course, Thursday night becoming the all-time leading scorer in NCAA women's basketball history. Pistol Pete, watch out, because she's coming, and she's got plenty of time to get there. For Mike DeCourcy